What's going on, all my myths, monsters, and mullets maniacs? I am your host, John Methenkamp. Today's show, we have Rome returning, and you may remember him from the episode entitled Eye to Eye with Sasquatch. Well, he comes back to tell the story he originally came into my live to tell, which was a UFO encounter in the same Fort Carson area where he saw Bigfoot. If you haven't watched that other episode, after this one, because you don't have to watch them in order, you can go back, find that episode called Eye to Eye with Sasquatch, and listen to that one. So without further ado, let's start the show.
It looked like a dog, you know. They call it like the dog man or something. I mean, this thing was built. I mean, this thing was rugged. I mean, it's something I wouldn't want to tangle with it, you know.
One night, I'm sitting there and I had a dead body in my bed.
Yes, that's when I started hearing the doors opening and closing and them walking through the house.
I called everyone out there. So you guys got to see this. This is incredible. I don't know what I'm looking at, but it's huge. I had witnessed something that I probably shouldn't have.
And welcome back to Myths, Monsters, and Mullets. I am your host, John Methenkamp, and this is part 2 of my conversation with Rome. And in the previous episode, we were talking Bigfoot, but we're going to pivot now and get to, you came into the live to talk about a UFO encounter.
Yes.
And we had some technical difficulties that I mentioned in the previous episode. And I might actually add some audio from that to show everybody what we're talking about, where it got weird. It really got weird.
Yeah, and it was awful coincidental, with air quotes.
Right. So we're in Colorado, and let's go right into it. What year was this? And you've got the floor.
Okay. This occurred back in 1995, and I believe I was 23 years old at the time. And the reason I know it was 1995 was a conversation I was having with one of the people that was there to witness this with me. But he was painting my brother's 65 El Camino, and that's why I was out there. And he's like, yeah, this truck hasn't looked this good in 30 years. And that, just him saying that, really, because it was hard for me to believe or to remember exactly what year it was without having him say that. So it was 1995, and we're standing there. Actually, he was in the process of painting at the time, and I'm standing in what was like an office room of his shop, and I'm looking out over the plains, because the town we were in was Williamsburg, and it's up on the hillside from the what would be the Arkansas Valley, and from that vantage point, you can see for at least 30 miles out onto the plains. And I was just standing there waiting for him to get done doing what he was doing, and I'm looking out the window of the office, and I notice some lights, or a light in the sky, and I focus in on it, looking. Say, well, that's strange, because it's not just a light. Well, I walked outside, and I'm standing there looking at it, and yes, there was a light, but that light was going around a craft. And when I say craft, this was not, it was not an orb or a flying disc, but this craft was, for the only frame of reference that I can give that would even be close would be a stadium. Now, this craft, it sat there hovering in the same place, and eventually we ended up watching it for at least 25 minutes hovering in the same place. Now, the shape of the craft was in the shape of two rectangles. The rectangle on the right would be laying flat, where the rectangle on the left was upright, but they're butted together. And that was probably what really got my attention. This, overall, the size of it, but the shape of it. But this like amber orange light was going around the midsection of it. It would go from left to right, and then it would disappear, and then it would come back on the left to the right and disappear. It was going around the circumference. Um, the the rectangles were they were shiny like glass. You could see panels, and there were probably, I don't know, 6 or 8 different panels in each of the rectangles, and I could see the night sky reflecting light off of these panels, and it looked like tinted windows, because you could see like a light in the interior, but it wasn't like a really bright light. You could see like backlighting behind the glass, um, and it was quite the spectacle. And of course, once I know what I'm looking at, I called everyone. His whole family was there, and he, a couple other friends were there. I called everyone out there. So you guys got to see this. This is this is incredible. I don't know what I'm looking at, but it's huge. And um, so we all gather, and we're out there looking. Now we're up on the hillside, and there's certain markers, and you can tell exactly where it is. The distance was about 22, 23 miles. So also with that, having that in mind, you can judge a pretty close distance as far as how far out it was, exactly where it was. We could see out on the prairie the different terrains um, in the mountains, or well, the prairie. But I could see that it was, pretty much exactly where it was. And we sat there watching it. It's like, well, this is crazy. This is, for one, it's a box craft just hovering there. And okay, we're watching it, and we're all chiming in. It's like, what is it? What is this? This is crazy. But at that distance, you could tell that the size, it was massive. It just, it doesn't belong there, for one. It doesn't belong in the air. But so we're all just standing there watching it, watching it. Well, pretty soon, now this occurred on the prairie that would be the southwest corner of the Fort Carson property, the United States Army property. And there's a ridge to the north that would go out onto their training grounds. And this is probably, I want to say, 20 miles from the actual base, but they own a massive stretch of property through there. But just to give you an idea, it's about 20 miles from the base. and we're sitting there watching it. And I don't know how long this craft had been hovering there. I I noticed it, and it had been there. So um, I have other stories that tie into this that'll tell me a little more. But so we're watching this craft hover, and we're thinking, we're all thinking this is really cool. I mean, it's way too big to be anything man-made. Um, we don't have anything that big that can just sit there and hover, especially with the zero aerodynamics it had. I mean, it was not a body in flight as far as we would be able to identify. So we're sitting there watching, and over the northern ridge, we see headlights coming over. Now I automatically knew, well, that's on the Fort Carson property. Those are ground troops, and they came just flying over that ridge. And then from the ridge, it drops down into a little bit of a valley. I mean, we could identify those are headlights, and there was like 4 or 5 of them that just came popping over the ridge and dropped down into that valley, which was pretty much not directly under, but close to under this craft. And about the time the last vehicle comes over the ridge, 2 helicopters came in from the north, and they were coming in extremely hot. I mean, they're moving. And then they both get up to the vicinity of the craft, and I would just guess probably a half mile or so from the craft. And then one of the helicopters stopped and stayed stationary while the second one does a loop around the craft. And then they met up together, and then they backed away. They just backed away from the craft. Now, the helicopters we could identify. I mean, we could see those. They obvious helicopters, but you could have stacked over a dozen. I mean, I don't know. You could have stacked helicopter on helicopter on helicopter inside this craft. I mean, there was the craft just dwarfed the helicopters. But anyway, they back away from the craft, and then I saw 3 missiles come from the ground. It was 1, pause, 2, pause, and then a third one. And each missile hit into the belly of this craft, and you could see, after the first missile strike, you could see the glass panels flex. They didn't blow into pieces. But you could see, after the impact, and then the glass panels would shimmer, and you could see it flexing, and there was give to it. But after each missile hit, those panels would just shake. And then after the third one hit, then the craft just started drifting toward the ground. I mean, it didn't just fall instantly out of the sky. It was like it was losing power, so it just gradually drifted to the ground. Now, I didn't see it come in contact with the ground because of the valley that it came down in. I can only assume, after being hit with 3 missiles and watching it go down, it came in contact with the ground. That's where it landed. It never came back up again. And at that point, everybody that's standing, I mean, there had to have been at least a dozen people standing there And we're all just standing there, just astonished, amazed, um, maybe a little bit of fear, no, more than a little. But it's like, what are they doing? And as soon as they popped over the hill, I knew it was like, this is not going to work out. Something big is going to happen. And sure enough, and that's what was running through my mind is how could they do that? How why? And a million questions rushed through my mind all at once. It's like, why, what, who? I know who, but why? It wasn't posing a threat, whatever it is. And so we're just standing around, just dumbfounded. It's like, what in the world did we just see? And um, that was not. I mean, I'm not going to say that was the end of it, but yeah, after that, it freaked me out. Um, I raced home and shut all the blinds and basically went into hiding because I knew I had witnessed something that I probably shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Everybody there was just I don't know, the emotions of everyone is like, what in the world? And uh, that has haunted me, well, almost all of my life. That's half of my life. And
Yeah.
it of course, later I'm looking for answers, looking for some kind of a reporting or anything that would say this happened. But at the same time, so the uh, the next day, I called one of my best friends and I said, "Dude, I've got a story to tell you. I saw something last night that I can't explain, and you got to hear this." And he, at the same time, he's like, "No, dude, you need to hear what we saw last night." I was like, "Oh, really?" He's like, "Yeah, it was crazy." So we'd got together later that day and compared stories. Well, he was in Canyon City, which is another, I don't know, 10 miles, 15 miles away from where I was. And they watched it happen. And then I watched it happen from Williamsburg, which is 10 miles closer. But he was telling me that the helicopters, they didn't just back away, they also um, lit up on that craft. But from my perspective, they backed away and they were behind the craft to where I couldn't even see them. But yeah, they had backed off to the north and they're opening fire on this craft. All I saw were the three missiles. And because I'm asking him, I said, "What did I just saw the three missiles?" He's like, "Dude, we didn't see the three missiles. We saw the helicopters open fire on it." And which kind of confused me because it's like, well, I mean, I saw the helicopters, but they disappeared behind the craft. So I didn't see that part, but we both parties saw it go down.
Holy
And
cow.
yeah, yeah. It was insane. I mean, it left me with so many questions of what's real, you know. Now I asked my buddy, I was like, I told him, I said, now when I saw it, it was just hovering. He's like, "No, dude, we saw it come in." He said it came in really low from the south, and then it got to where it was hovering. It just got to where it was hovering, and that's where it stayed. And I was like, "Well, how long did you watch it?" He's like, "We had to have watched it for 35, 40 minutes. He said, but it drifted in from the south, real low and silent. Now, at that distance, you can still hear a jet engine. You can hear anything jet propelled 20 miles away. And I didn't hear any sound. I mean, the only sound I heard were everybody breathing. There was the craft made absolutely no sound, but he said it drifted in from the south, and which is right along the mountain range. I don't know where it came from. He says I just saw it come in from the south, and then it just sat there, and it freaked me out. I and where do you go with something like that? Now, if I had been in the frame of mind that I'm in now, I would have drove straight to the scene. But I was a 20-something-year-old kid. I was scared to death. I'm not going over there. You couldn't pay me to go over there. Because
Right.
guess what you're gonna be encountered with, you know. Um, and I wish things were different, because, like I said, if it was me today, I would go straight to it. Say, what do you got here? Um, but no, well,
Yeah.
um,
So
the
yeah, I know you said it left you with a lot of questions.
well,
I have a
yeah,
lot of questions.
well, yeah,
So when you're describing, you described it as two rectangles,
right,
correct? Kind
right.
of butted up against each other. Were they kind of like an L shape?
Yeah, yeah. To where the one on the left was upright, and the one on the right was uh, laying down. So yeah, it was basically an L shape, to where the one on the left that was upright didn't come all the way down, like flush to the bottom. It was like halfway down on the right rectangle. So yeah, it didn't
Almost
it
T shaped then. Like,
well, it was like, mm, you got two boxes, and one's upright. The one that's upright only comes down halfway on the one laying
okay,
flat.
I got you. So
Right.
there's like they were offset.
Right, there you go. They were
Okay.
offset, but the glass panels, and I say glass, I don't know. I mean, it just reminded me of like a skyscraper's glass panels.
Yeah.
I could see light behind the glass, but it wasn't like shining outward. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't a bright light. It was like dim lights behind the glass panels, like looking through tinted glass, and the lights are on behind the glass.
And I may have missed this, but what time of day was this?
Oh yeah, it was probably about 11:30 at night, in the late night hours. Basically in the middle of the night.
Right.
And I remember this. I mean, um, this was in the summertime, and I can't remember, month or date or anything like that. But I remember it was summer, because it was too hot to be in that shop, because he didn't have air conditioning. It was too hot to be working in the shop during the day, so he'd come out at night and do his paint and body. And
So was there a lot of like moonlight? Because I know people
yeah,
are going to question, how you were able to see all this if it was at night. This is the time in the show where most people would have an ad break for their sponsors. I don't have any sponsors. So if you'd like to support the show, you can do it a couple ways. One, you can go over to TikTok subscribe to my channel, and you'll get some perks over there, such as early access to all the episodes before they come out, some fun little stickers to use during the chat, and a shout out before the next show. The other way you can do it is by buying me a coffee. Go over to buymeacoffee.com, look for Myths, Monsters, and Mullets. You can make a small donation there. Eventually there will be upgrades to that, where you'll get the same perks as you do on TikTok. Thank you for your support.
The moon, the stars, the night sky, you could see that light reflecting, or reflecting off of the glass. I mean, it was, of course, it's pretty well pitch black out on the prairie. So
Yeah.
between the light from within the craft and the night sky, it was, I'm not going to say it was well lit by any stretch, but you could definitely identify it. It was very visible in the night sky.
And then when you said you saw the rockets or projectiles of some sort hit the craft,
Uh-huh.
so did it seem like it was absorbing the impact, or did you actually see like flames and explosion coming out the bottom of it?
No, there were no flames and explosion. It's almost like they penetrated and then exploded, like internally.
So like you
And
said, the windows flexed like you would imagine.
right, the shimmering of big panels of glass, you could
Yeah.
see that. It's like they exploded internally and they just shimmered. And you see too many movies of missiles hitting their target and just exploding everything, and the big sci-fi movies. That was not at all what I saw. I mean, it wasn't, that wasn't what happened here. And
Right.
But as the craft is floating down, now that light that was going around it, it never went out. It continued doing its round and round as it drifted to the ground. And
Yeah.
and I don't know, it was a couple days after. I had a friend that was in the Air Force, and he was in communications, or say, I'm not exactly sure what he was in, but he was in the Air Force. And I thought, well, I'm going to talk to him about this. And I explained to him, I was like, look, dude, I saw this craft. I saw the Army take it down. And I explained, I mean, I think I even drew a drawing of it. I said, is there any possible chance this is man-made, or could this have been some kind of a training mission? And he looks me straight in the eyes and says, dude, we don't have anything that big. He says, there is nothing that big. And he says, but if it was a training mission of any kind, they're not going to shoot something that big out of the sky. He says, for one, he says, it wasn't necessarily on the property. I mean, that was kind of his dead giveaway. It's like, that's not on the Fort Carson property. So they can't be doing live training over civilian population, or it's actually private property. But he
It's still
says,
very close to
right,
civilian populations.
that's just a little too close for them to be playing games. And
Right.
but he's like, no, he says, if this is what you're saying it is we don't have anything that big. And like I was saying, at that distance, it still looked as big as a stadium. I mean, I've spent a little bit of time around the Denver area, and you can see the Mile High Stadium, or Invesco Stadium, whatever it was at the time. You can get a comparison of how big that is. And this was every bit that size, if not bigger.
Holy
And I
cow.
mean, and once you get talking sizes like that, it's like, well, how many feet was it? It's like, I don't know, huge. I mean, how many feet is huge? Um,
Right.
but yeah, it was when we first saw it, it was floating about, I would say, at least a half a mile off the ground. At, at least a half mile, if not, it could have even been as high as, I don't think it was quite a mile high, but it was still pretty close to the ground. I mean, taking into consideration flight, and um, I would say it was at least a half a mile off the ground, which that's
Wow.
only what, 2,500 feet, you
Right.
know. Um, so yeah, it definitely got everyone's attention, and after it had went down, my instant thoughts were, this was not this was not a scout mission, this was not a scout craft. That craft was definitely large enough to have had thousands of occupants. Now, whether it did or not, I don't know, but that was the thought that was racing through my mind, is whatever was in there, however many was in there, number one, there could have quite possibly been survivors, because it did, like I said, it didn't just drop out of the sky like a stone. It drifted down to the ground. So it wasn't like a major impact. Um, so there, it is quite possible that there were survivors of that craft. The other thought is, this was possibly efforts to make contact. And what do? We shoot it out of the sky.
Well,
Now,
yeah, that's what humans do. We don't
right,
like it, we get rid of it.
right. We don't understand it. Shoot it. You know. Um, but I mean, it's left a lot of question. It's like, well, what was it even doing there? Like, well, I have suspicions on that. Just trying to make sense of it in my own mind. I mean, I have suspicions, and I honestly, I believe that it was having some type of malfunction, or technical difficulties of some kind. Because I can't imagine a craft that size just drifting down and hovering. Um, I mean, I don't know, but that would be my guess, is it's possible that it was having technical difficulties and lost its cloaking ability, and then it's exposed to, hey, here we are. Um, I don't know, but I could also understand from the Army's standpoint. They had an unknown craft invading their airspace.
Right.
So I mean, I get it, but at the same time, but one of the basic rules of hunting is, you don't shoot unless you know what it is. Well, it's almost like it didn't matter what it was. Um, which I mean, I don't know what to think of it,
Yeah.
as far as the what's and the whys. I don't know. I just know what I mean. It was like watching a train crash. It was so spectacular, you couldn't help but to watch, but at the same time, it was devastating. I mean, not to me directly, but um,
But
it
it
was.
left an impact. It left an impact
Oh,
emotionally or whatever.
Oh yeah. There isn't. I think about that happening. I want to say, and this is, you know, 25 years later. I still think about it 2, 3 times a week,
Yeah.
and I'm still trying to make sense of it. But no reports, no nothing, and of course, there's no admission to it either.
Oh
But
no,
you
there's
know,
not going to be. There's not going to
no.
be. Not especially back then. You know, now they're starting to come out with some of the, you know, UFO, UAP, whatever they're calling it now. You know,
Well,
disclosure. But
even by today's standards, they're not going to admit that they open fired on a non-threatening craft.
right,
I
right,
mean, it's like, you know, the police shooting an unarmed man. They're not going to admit to that.
yeah.
Um, but
So did
it
so after this happened, I know you said you talked to your buddy who also witnessed it from a different vantage point. Did anybody like? Did you talk to anybody in that group that you were with about what you saw?
um, after the fact,
Right. I mean, like, did you guys sit down and be like, did we really see that, or what? You know, or was it just like everybody scattered and nobody ever talked about it again?
for about 2 minutes, we're standing there. What did we just see? Well, that was a UFO, and that was the U.S. Army responding to it. I mean, it was, and we really didn't have anything to say. It's like, holy cow. Um, and like I said, immediately following, I jumped in my pickup and I drove home, pulled the shades, and I locked myself in the house for several days.
Yeah.
Well, not several days because I'd went out, but anytime I went home, nope, draw the shades. I don't want anybody, you know, it's like I felt guilty for even having seen it. It's like I didn't do anything wrong. But if it gets out that I saw something I wasn't supposed to, what could happen? You know, you get stories, oh, you're going to get visited by the men in black. It's like, well, I didn't want to talk to nobody about it. As far as
Right.
any government officials, I wasn't going to go to the local law enforcement and say, hey, this is what I saw. They're going to wrap you up in a hug me jacket and send you somewhere safe. But what amazed me was the number of people. You know, it's like there's been several people's like, well, you know, what kind of hallucinogenics were you taking? Like, well, you know, that would have been fine, but there were close to 2 dozen people that witnessed this. You know, there was a dozen people in my group, and then another, well, probably half dozen in another completely separate group. It wasn't a mirage. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't. I mean, we all saw the same thing,
Right. And
and
I guess that I need to rephrase what I meant.
okay,
Um, like, do you still have contact with the people that witnessed this, or you know,
with
years down the road, did you guys talk about this incident?
oh yeah, yeah, that the well, one of my best friends that was in the other party, um, we've recently discussed it, and he's not comfortable discussing it, even with me. Um, well, I mean, between us two, yeah, we're fine with it. Um, I had reported it to uh, a group, and they said, you know, can we get this other witness's testimony? And I said, well, I can see. And I asked him, hey, would you be cool with submitting your testimony to this? He's like, nope, I don't want anything to do with it. Like,
Yeah.
okay, can I ask why?
Was that MUFON?
Yes,
Okay.
that I met with the state director or whatever they introduced themselves as, and they were all, if we can get someone else to back up your story. And I was like, you know what? The one person I'm still in contact with, I'll see. But out of all those people, I have lost contact with them. They weren't near and dear close friends of mine to begin with.
Right.
But I did run into one of the girls that was there with me, and I'm I'm not 100% positive that she was even there, because I ran into her probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. And I asked her, I said, hey, do you remember being out at that guy's house that was doing the paint and body out there in Williamsburg? She's like, oh yeah, I remember being out there occasionally. I said, do you remember what we saw that one night? And she drew a blank. She's like, I I'm not sure what you're talking about. And I said, you were standing there with me. She's like, I don't think I was.
Could it be that she just doesn't want to accept what happened, or doesn't want to say it publicly because she's afraid of sounding
I
crazy?
I don't know, but she was pretty interested in the story. And it's like, I know you were standing right next to me. I mean, I wasn't really focused on who was there, but I I thought for sure she was standing right next to me. But
Yeah.
I questioned her about it, and she's like, no, it sounds like an interesting story. I was like, girl, maybe I was maybe a slight bit confused at the moment as to who was standing next to me.
People got to realize that time has passed, and some
Right.
things do get fuzzy,
This has been 30 years ago, and maybe I was mistaken on who was standing right next to me. Um,
Right.
I mean, I'm not going to say that's out of the realm of possibility, because I wasn't focused on who was standing next to me.
Oh, right.
I was
Right.
focused on what in the hell is going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
You're not getting phone numbers at that point.
right. It wasn't.
Hey, I know we got an alien invasion going on over here, but can I get your number?
Yeah. We need to talk about this later.
Right. Right.
What a smooth pickup line.
I'd like to beam you up.
Yeah, but the the lack of information about this is because I live probably less than 15 miles from that location where the craft went down, and I've been out there. Um, there's a there's a straight road from Highway 50 going north, and it Stone City Road, which is it's an old abandoned town, but the road just goes straight into the Fort Carson. It's a gate. It's inactive, but it is a gate. And I've been out there investigating and looking around at the terrain and the possibilities, and triangulating exactly where. And um the first time I went out there, it was me and my grandson. Um and this was probably 10 years ago, but we went out there, and we pulled up to the gate, and I'm just scanning the valley and trying to look for any kind of a unnatural disturbance in the ground, um and getting a bearing on where the ridge line was, where the road is that came over the ridge, and just basically determining exactly where it was. And we weren't even at that gate for 2-3 minutes. And then up on the ridge line, I noticed an SUV parked It popped up over the ridge and parked on top of the ridge. And I knew at that point we're being watched, and um, kind of made me uneasy. So I didn't hang out very long. Um,
Which
but
I mean that's going to happen whether they had a UFO encounter there or not. I mean,
right, right. I mean,
they've got
that's
sensors and cameras everywhere. They know you're there.
right. They knew I was there before I was there, because that road is, I mean, it's a little 2-lane road. It's about 2.5 miles long, and it's a straight shot to the gate. Um, but it still, I mean, it played into making me very uneasy. And me and the grandson, I told him, I said, you don't need to be a part of this. If it is something, you don't need to be a part of it.
Right. Right.
But where do you go with a story like that? That there was multiple witnesses in different locations, and we all have the same story, or well, at least everybody that I've talked to is like, yeah, same story, same. Where do you go with that? I mean, you don't go to law enforcement, or I wouldn't, because, well, at that time, and probably even more so today, I don't I don't trust them to tell them something like that.
Yeah.
And for one, it's not going to go anywhere. But where do you get a story like that out? Because
On
it's
myths, monsters, and mullets. That's where you
ex-
go.
exactly, because it sounds, even as I'm explaining this story to you, it sounds crazy to me, and I'm the one that saw it.
But does it sound crazy because that's what they want you to think? And that's what they beat into your mind with all these different shows and the news, laughing at people having encounters, you know, so that you don't come out and tell these stories.
Right, and the biggest reason I have remained fairly quiet about it was I didn't want to be ridiculed. I didn't want other people to think, oh, he's crazy. I was more concerned with what everyone else would say or think than I was about the facts and the truth of what I saw. Now, I'm I'm not even 100%. I mean, I'm 99.9% sure, but I can't say that absolutely 100% this was an alien craft. But that leads
But
me
it
to
was
question.
definitely, I mean,
It
it was
leads
an
me to,
unidentified flying object, though.
yes, and it leads me to believe, I mean, through the process of elimination of what it could possibly be, that's what I have come up with. Um, and not knowing, well, in a sense, it's speculation, but something like that, I mean, you're left with minimal logical answers. And
Right. And
um,
let's think about this for a minute. I know our government wastes a lot of money, but if we had a craft that big and it's obviously some kind of, you know, advanced tech, why the hell would we shoot it down? You
well, and
know?
that was the thought that run through my mind, that this was no training exercise, because an object that size, if our military can't hit it, they're in the wrong game. It's like,
Right.
um
Right. We don't need a
it
military if they can't hit something that big.
right, it was too big to miss. And um I got a buddy that was in the army back in those days, and of course, I discussed this with him, and just explaining to him what I saw happen. He's like, "You do realize that I was the guy riding on the back of that Humvee shooting those missiles. He says, what you explained to me, yeah, that's what I did in Afghanistan. Like, oh, okay, then you probably know more about the weapons that that I'm describing. He's like, oh yeah. He's like, that is totally within the capabilities. That's not far fetched at all. He's like, and he
Yeah,
had,
I never
I
served, and my knowledge of our weaponry is what I see in movies, video games, and things like that. So
well, and that's
you
where
you
I'm
could have
at.
told me that they were shooting laser beams, and I'm going to believe you.
Right. It's like, but yeah, he was telling me like, no, that's what I did. I rode the back of a Humvee and launched missiles. And it's like, oh, sweet.
Wow.
But what I was looking at was the time frame from when we first saw the craft till the vehicles showed up. Um, it was about 25 minutes, or give or take a few. But that's about how fast you could drive from the base to that location.
Yeah. And you said it
Um,
was like about 20 miles, and you
right.
know, if you're driving full out
Well,
trying to get out
right.
there, you're going to make it in
And
about 20 minutes.
they've got roads all throughout that property. But I imagine going, you know, Humvee speed, yeah, you could make it there in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
The helicopters, I don't know how quick they can get, you know, from sitting still to up in the air and make it there, but it was interesting because they showed up basically at the same time. And
Which
um,
they could have coordinated that, we,
right,
we want
right,
them to be there at the same
right.
time.
We're over the ridge waiting on you, or the helicopters are, hey, we're waiting on you to show up. We need ground support. I don't know how that works, but
Right.
it was coordinated. The other thing that gets me is they were given orders. Now, um, I don't know if it would have been the base commander to be giving orders like that. As far as we have an unknown craft encroaching our airspace. Somebody higher up, and that was another thing that was running through my mind, is how many people in the Army that were involved with this. Now, you figure there was 3 people per Humvee or ground troops. There was at least 3 people per vehicle, so there's a dozen people or more. There was at least 2 people in the choppers, so there's 4 more people. There was at least, the communications people. Okay, there's another half dozen. Um, there had to have been somebody to give the order to take the craft down, and how many different chains of command that would go through. So it's not like it was a black ops. It's not like there's 3 guys and we're the only ones that know what's going on. No, there were quite a few people involved, and since that had happened, I've been waiting. This whole whistleblower craze is coming out, and there's people telling stories of the crazy things that the military has done and has been involved with and orchestrated. I'm waiting to hear someone from that side come out and say, this is what we did. And I would think that there would be some level of guilt that would make someone come out and be a whistleblower, because if there were people, if there were individuals on that craft, there were dead ones too. And for what? I would feel guilty, you know. Um, and I would probably want to expose the story, but I guess that depends on how, I'm sure there was a briefing and non-disclosure agreements signed, and you will never speak of this again, that kind of stuff.
Right. Right. Our government's good at that.
Right. I mean, there's still people from back in the 50s and 60s that can't say what they were doing in Area 51. But this is a little, maybe not a little military base, but this is just a an army base with the, I don't know how many thousands of acres of property they own, but it's their training grounds. But
Right.
given the opportunity to go live fire, oh, you can imagine those kids were just pumped up, you know.
Well, and if they're looking at a freaking UFO, so they're hyped up.
Well, and then I've been asked, well, what happened to the craft? And it's like, that's the $1 million question. I know it's not there now, and I know it wasn't there 10 years ago. And I mean, I don't know how fast, I mean, our military can make things happen really quick if they need to. Is it possible within 2 days' time that craft was disassembled and taken somewhere piece by piece?
Or repaired and it left.
I don't know if well, I guess it's possible it repaired, but I don't think so. I mean, um, I think
I'm
it
just
was
saying. I mean,
right.
there's a flip side to this. Is yeah, we took it down, and maybe we couldn't get into it. The aliens or whatever, they're like, we just got to get out of here. So they fix their ship and they leave. That's
Right.
another possibility.
But see, I have thoughts about this Fort Carson base. Um, and I don't know if I should openly say this or not, but about the time Area 51 was being recognized, that the government was actually admitting, yes, we have this Area 51, and it is a secret site, and yes, it does exist. About the time they came out and openly admitted it, a lot of their projects were split up between 2 or 3 other bases. And this is rumor, this is speculation, and but it is one of the rumors that I have heard that Fort Carson was one of the bases. All their technology is being spread out to. Now, Cheyenne Mountain being right there, well, it's across the highway from Fort Carson base, NORAD. That's all underground. And the tunneling machine that they use to tunnel out, we could go into conspiracies here because nobody knows. It is completely possible that all throughout the underground of the Fort Carson property is tunneled out. Is it possible? Yes.
I
Is
just
it
saw a
like
thing, I think it was yesterday or day before, and it was talking about this declassified map of all the military tunnels under the United
the
States.
the DUMBs, the deep underground military bases?
Yes, but it's more like highways under the ground, like connecting all
Under
these things.
the real underground railroads, I believe in those.
Correct.
The
Correct.
the
That's
the
what I
high
was
speed.
seeing is just like there are these tunnels that travel to each one of these military installations. It would
Yes.
make sense.
Well, yeah, and they have the technology to do it. I watched a deal, and I don't know, maybe this was science fiction, but they have a boring machine that doesn't just drill a hole, it melts it. It turns it to glass. And I forget some kind of a nuclear fission. I don't know what it was exactly, but it's a boring
It's above
machine.
my pay grade.
Right, right. I don't work on the machine. I couldn't tell you, but this is what they said it does. It takes all the material that would normally be extracted as waste. It melts it into a glass coating, and there's no waste. So you could just start drilling and go. I don't know how true that is. Like I said, I've never seen the machine. I've only seen videos of what it could do. I don't even know if that's true or not.
It doesn't sound out of the realm of possibility, though.
Well, I believe it because I also believe that there's a connection between DIA, which is up in Denver, and NORAD. And I firmly
Well,
believe that
you're not the only one who thinks that. There's a lot of stuff with Denver International Airport and
right,
what's underground.
right. And I mean, it's not very far from the mountain range, and that mountain range would tie straight in with NORAD. And if they just kept boring going north under the mountain, it could be cities under there. I mean, multiple cities underneath that mountain. No one would ever know.
But a lot of people talk about it, whistleblowers and stuff about these underground cities.
Right, right. Now, it is a possibility that this craft was cut into manageable pieces, and I honestly, I believe there are some underground structures on the Fort Carson property. Just a hunch. I mean, it's just a hunch. But where would you, even if you cut this craft into pieces, where the hell would you go with it? You know, I mean,
Wright Patterson Air Force Base.
It's not going to fit on a train car or the back of a flatbed truck. I mean, it would be in lots of pieces at that point, which I don't know. But these are the questions that I'm left trying to answer without having anyone that, without having anyone with true answers. I don't know. I've seen demo jobs to where we go in and demo a building and it comes down pretty quick. And at that point, you're left with pretty much a pile of rubble, and that disappears fairly quick. So,
Right.
honestly, I don't know. It's given me more questions than zero answers, which is really frustrating to me because I love hearing facts. I love dealing with facts because you can't argue facts. I mean,
Right.
I've got all kinds of speculation, but I don't know.
Right.
It's frustrating to me. But if there's a
Yeah.
whistleblower out there that had anything to do with this Fort Carson sighting, I would love to hear from them. I would love to.
Me too. Me too. You can contact me. I will get you in touch with Rome, and we'll do a group chat.
Yeah, I'll fly you out here and we can go have coffee. You know?
Hell yeah. Well, Rome, I tell you what, this has been an amazing interview, and it'll end up being 2 episodes.
Well,
So, yeah, I just want to thank you for coming on tonight,
well, thank you.
and I'm glad that you stumbled into my live, even though when we tried to do it, my live mysteriously shut down that night.
Sorry about that.
But yeah, so thank you again. And if you have a UFO encounter, Bigfoot encounter, seen a ghost, maybe you saw Bigfoot flying a UFO while doing a ghost hunt, I want to hear about it. You can contact me at mythsandmullets@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, and shoot me a message, and we'll get you on the show. I'll talk to you later. Gotta go. And that's it for tonight. If you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share, you can email me at mythsandmullets@gmail.com. And once again, I'd like to thank Rome for coming on the show. Have a good night, everyone.
Like a freight train, 'cause what you make me